Sports Show. This is episode 708 with special guest Coach Steve Lavin and also my co-host Alyssa Charleston. Steve Lavin used to coach UCLA and St. John's, a local team over here. Man, what a resume! 20+ winning seasons, coached 17 NBA players, and made a lot of playoff appearances in college basketball. I'm really excited for this interview, Steve, and thank you for taking the time and finally making this happen. How are you and your family doing so far in the year of 2021?
Yeah, for starters, thanks for having me on the show, and been looking forward to it. And I appreciate your patience. I know it's been a busy year for everyone, yourselves included. So just grateful to, be healthy, and looking forward to March Madness as we head towards the NCAA tournament. And it's a gift to be able to participate in shows like this. Thanks to technology, we've been able to navigate through COVID-19 and still be able to entertain viewers and present sports in the best possible light.
It's a gift to have you on the show so we can pick your brain, because you've had so many incredible experiences and had a ton of success. I'm really curious, not a lot of players, because you played obviously Chapman University, you have that player perspective, but not a lot of players know that they want to coach, or they know for sure they don't want to coach. So I'm really curious. Obviously your dad has that background at USF as a player as well, but when did you kind of realize you wanted to coach and wanted to mentor?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think by the time I was a junior in high school, I was part of a really successful basketball program. I was a very average basketball talent, but was fortunate to play on great teams. And that increased the likelihood of being able to play in college. I started at San Francisco State in terms of my schooling and collegiate athletics experience. And then my coach at San Francisco State, Kevin Wilson, was hired by Chapman. Then it was Chapman College, now Chapman University. And because I wanted to coach, I followed him. He was a mentor of mine. But my high school coach, Pete Hayward, at Sir Francis Drake High School, he had outstanding summer camps. And so from a young age, I was attending his camps. And it was really like a farm system, almost like AAA baseball. Everyone that went to his camps that eventually went to his high school learned the same shot mechanics and the fundamentals and the right way to play the game, both offensively and defensively. And our group won 2 state championships and won 58 straight games, I think it was, over those 2 years, 1980-81 and 81-82 California state titles. So I think the success and the camaraderie with the teammates, the role that mentors had in my life from a young age in terms of playground directors and youth league coaches. I played soccer and little league and then really focused in on basketball when I got to high school. But all of those experiences were so positive that it led to me having an interest in coaching and teaching. And because my father was an English literature, poetry teacher and a writer, and he authored 17 books, he taught at Cal Berkeley and a number of other schools in Northern California. His love of language and also the love of basketball, I think, played a part in me pursuing a career in teaching and coaching.
So what would you say, what experience did you learn as a player throughout your college career? And then also, what would you say that helped you along the way as a player that got into coaching for you?
Yeah, I think it's all those, fundamentals, the attributes, the traits, the qualities, characteristics, however we want to describe them, but the things that we learn through team sport. In terms of being a good teammate, attention to detail, preparation, the rehearsal aspect that practice brings, and, concentration, focus. These are things that we learn through athletics, and yet they transcend the sport. They're fundamentals of life, so they help you prepare for and navigate the challenges that ultimately come our way in life. But sport is a safe way, a wonderful way to learn these really important qualities, the equivalent of a good toolbox. I've told people before, like a flashlight or a compass. that's what we learn through athletics and through sport.
I've also heard you say on a podcast that curiosity and having interest in humans and things are way more important really than networking and, you know, trying to get in with certain people and knowing certain people and how that can help your career. I'm really curious when you realize that, and has it ever prompted you to kind of take a risk and catapult something in your career, or like make you reach out to somebody or something and kind of go from there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say I had wonderful parents that were curious and had an appreciation for music and cinema and art and literature, and their example for being interested and staying interested through their entire life into their mid 80s before they passed really had a profound influence on their children. There were 6 of us and I was the youngest. So whether it was my father bringing me to the Charlie Chaplin Film Festival in San Francisco, or to see the Marx Brothers, or go to a Bobby Short concert, who's a great New York piano player, pianist, and vocalist as well. These experiences, foreign films, you know, Fellini and Cocteau and Truffaut, some of the best French and Italian films that they took me to when I was a child, those really had an impression on me. And so I was grateful just to have parents that were interested in raising their children, interested in kind of widening the lens or the prism that they looked at the world through. So even though as a youngster, it was difficult with the subtitles, I'm glad that they encouraged us to be interested in history and in art and in reading. So just listening to their conversations in my youth had a big effect on me, whether they were talking, you know, about philosophers and what is the meaning of life, existential experiences, what is love, these really kind of interesting topics. So I think as I've moved down the line of my life, I've tried to keep that curiosity alive. And if it's related to my players and getting to know them better, or their families, or what are the things that I can do to bring forth their full potential or get closer to the full expression of their potential, because ultimately what we're after is not just winning a lot of games, but also putting young people on a positive trajectory for the rest of their life. And they also inform us. You know, my players teach me, and kind of close the gap, because as a coach, every year you get older, but you continue to coach the same age group. You start recruiting kids when they're 13, 14, 15, 16, and then they come play for you, you know, 18, 19, 20, 21, sometimes 22 years old if they redshirt. So one of the real blessings is when you work with young people, they keep you young and help inform what's happening in the here and now, the present.
So I want to talk about your coaching career in UCLA first. I've seen that you posted videos on Instagram with some classic videos back in the day, you coaching. And what was it like coaching UCLA in front of those fan base? And obviously you had Earl Watson, a former NBA player, and then Tracy Murray came through that school. I actually had Tracy Murray on the show last year. It was an honor talking to him. And so what was it like, your experience like learning coaching at UCLA?
Yeah, you know, it's so difficult to encapsulate 12 years, because I arrived at UCLA in 1991. I was given the pink slip in 2003, and it was just this wonderful 12-year odyssey. And I'd come from Purdue. My prior stop was working under Gene Cady at Purdue University. And I met Coach Wooden when I was at Purdue University. And that played a part, along with Jim Herrick and Mark Gottfried, who were on staff at UCLA, but led to me coming to UCLA in 1991. And just the opportunity to win a national championship. Jim Herrick was the head coach. I was an assistant with Lorenzo Romar and Mark Gottfried. Our staff was very close, and wonderful players, student athletes that you meet when you work at a place like UCLA. The whole campus, for that matter, it's a world-class university. So you meet, you know, Nobel Prize winners and Pulitzer Prize winners, and some of the leading researchers in the world trying to find cures for cancer and other dreaded diseases. And it's just a university that represents excellence. And so I was fortunate to be there 5 years as an assistant, 7 years as a head coach, and to learn from John Wooden.
Yeah.
Someone who was a great friend and a mentor. And I realized, UCLA is not the type of job that you're going to be able to retire in. Every coach before me got fired. Every coach after me has been fired. So you understand that. So you just give thanks and you salute and you wish the next guy well, batter up, because if anyone understands how challenging the job at UCLA is in basketball, or football at USC, or Notre Dame in football, it's someone who's actually been a head coach there. So I'm rooting hard for Mick Cronin to get that 12th national title and bring it back to Westwood and hang it from the rafters in Poly Pavilion.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. I'm just curious. What was the recruiting process like back in the day, in the 90s?
Yeah, what's changed is technology.
Yeah.
It's still about connection and establishing trust or rapport with young people, and also their surrounding support group, the high school coaches, the AAU coaches, grandparents and parents, and uncles and aunts, and getting a feel for a player to find out whether or not he's going to be a good fit at your respective university, in terms of the one that I worked at, Purdue, UCLA, and St. John's. And each school is different. They're in 3 different areas of the country, different time zones. But the commonality is establishing rapport and trust, and working towards bringing out the best in a young person, and that group, that team that's trying to work in concert to achieve goals, winning the championship and making a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And it's the relationships, in my view, that matter most, not just in life, but in basketball.
That's really interesting, because we had someone on, I think it was last week, that was talking, Tony Casillas, saying, asking his college coach, like, what was more important, winning a national championship in college versus winning a Super Bowl in the NFL. And he said college just meant more, because you get to know the players, you get to know their families, and you get to choose who comes to you. And you don't get that as much in the NFL. So it's those relationships. That's fascinating to me. I'm curious about that 95 national championship season, how sweet that feeling was, or like maybe how surreal it was, and just that crazy run. O'Bannon brothers, I mean, just the season in general.
Yeah, it really was surreal. It was like a Hollywood script, appropriately, at UCLA, in Los Angeles, Tinseltown, Hollywood. And every aspect of that season just played out to perfection. 32-1. I think our record officially was 31-2, but it was changed because of a game against Cal. They got reversed in terms of NCAA rules or whatnot. So on the books, we are 32-1. But we actually lost twice that year, at Oregon, and Cal came into Poly Pavilion and beat us. But interestingly, through history, we got to reclaim that loss. And no one was injured until the Final Four. Tyus Edney hurt his hand. That's why he only could play a few minutes of the championship game. But Cameron Dollar stepped in and, in a seamless manner, quarterbacked us to a victory. Ed O'Bannon, from start to finish, I think had as dominant a season as I can remember. That goes back decades. The last 25 years, I can't think of a player who was more consistently playing at a high level than Ed O'Bannon. There was the miraculous length of the court, Tyus Edney mad dash, buzzer-beating shot against Missouri up in Boise, Idaho, in the second round of the NCAA tournament. We had to battle back in that game. The Tigers played wonderfully, but destiny or fate played a hand, as Tyus was able to hit that buzzer beater and kind of extend our run, because we were likely to be fired that Monday when we came back to campus if we hadn't beat Missouri. And so he really changed the lives not only of every player on that team, but the assistant coaches, the head coaches. It gave us a reprieve, because we would have been out with our resumes that Final Four trying to get jobs. But instead, we were able to come back and coach another year at UCLA, because Tyus kept the dream alive of winning the national title. And the Kingdome in Seattle was electric. Coach Wood made the flight up to watch the championship game on that Monday night. So having Coach in the stands to be able to enjoy the first and only national championship that was won by a coach other than John Wooden himself, because he won 10 national titles and Jim Herrick won the 11th in 95, and no one has been able to bring another one back to Westwood since. But it was surreal. We had a Zoom anniversary during the COVID experience, and everyone got on and we talked into the late hours of the night. It was just great to see each other's faces. And again, technology allowing for a really special reunion.
Wow. 32-1 is crazy. I mean, in this college basketball season, I don't know which team can do that, but maybe in the women's side, Gonzaga can actually, yeah. And maybe UConn on the women's side too. UConn women is still going at it. It's crazy. But I want to ask you about one particular player that you coached at UCLA before we get to your St. John's. But Earl Watson, what was it like coaching him? And when was the first time you realized that he could be an NBA star?
The first time I saw him was in Las Vegas, and he was playing with an AAU program out of Kansas City that also had Jerron Rush on the team, and Mike Miller and Corey Maggette, among others, Corleone Young. It was the best AAU program in the history of basketball. Even to this day, it's kind of unparalleled. And Earl was quiet, but a fierce competitor. And he was just making all the right decisions. He wasn't being recruited at that point by the Blue Bloods. But the first time I talked to him on the phone, he was in Las Vegas. And in my view, I just shared with him that I thought he could have a 10-year career or more, similar to Maurice Cheeks. He reminded me of the old 76ers point guard in his understated bearing and manner and temperament, but he was fierce as a competitor and arguably got the most out of his ability. We talked about getting as close to the full expression of your potential. And I would say Earl came as close as any player I've had to maximizing all of his abilities. And it led to a 13-year career in the NBA, and then being the head coach of the Phoenix Suns. And if he chooses to get back into coaching, he'll continue to be a great coach and really a terrific mentor for young people, because he understands what it takes to achieve at the highest levels. His work ethic was unparalleled, his preparation and his conviction, just wanting to win. The front of the jersey, coaches often talk about, and players sometimes give lip service to. The name on the front of the jersey is more important than the name on the back of the jersey, meaning team is what it's all about. But Earl really lived that out through his example. And that's what true leadership is leading by example. Going back to my parents, right? What made them great parents, not only because they were married 60 years, that commitment to one another, but it was the life they led. And that's the most powerful, profound form of teaching or leadership.
I loved watching Earl Watson when he was with the Sonics, because I'm a Super Sonics fan till I die.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Because that leadership versus like Gary Payton, who was much more audible. You can hear him from way up high in the rafters. He was so much fun to watch. And I'm curious, when you came back from, going on the analyst side and getting back into coaching, UCLA, analysis, and then St. John's, did you notice a difference in the personalities of players? Because I've heard from coaches and trainers that there is just a little difference naturally with social media, with technology. There's a lot more, unfortunately, I versus we, and it's probably hard to sift those guys out recruiting wise. Did you notice that when you were recruiting? Did you have to kind of adapt to that?
Yeah, it's really interesting to your point. I was at UCLA 12 years. I did 7 years at ABC ESPN, but I was still close to the game. Even though I wasn't coaching, I'm observing players coast to coast through that wider angle lens, because you're not as myopic, focused just on your own team or your conference or the upcoming opponent or just your recruits. Instead, you open up that prism or lens and you're observing players and programs coast to coast. And barnstorming with Brent Musburger and Aaron Andrews at the time. We had so much fun together. But I was taking notes, in terms of the way coaches were delegating responsibilities for their staff, the way they were working and teaching and motivating young people. I looked at facilities as well. And then when I made the second run to St. John's, in coaching, I had a more informed perspective as a result. And then now I've been out again observing. And I would say that technology has been the biggest shift in terms of recruiting. For instance, the kids at St. John's that I targeted, we did most of our communication through texting. Then it was, Twitter and Instagram and these different, social media platforms, and unofficial visits became more popular instead of the official 48-hour window of recruiting. Kids would just come to your campus in the summertime or come to games. In New York, we had the advantage of the tri-state area with Jersey, Connecticut, and New York being so close to one another. And kids loved coming to Madison Square Garden just because the atmosphere was electric. But I think as teachers and coaches, just like parents, we have to continue to be creative and find fresh and original, lively ways to connect with young people. There's those phrases, meet them where they are. And technology is definitely, video games, an example of that. Yet I still think there's the opportunity to, have, your players, your prospects meet you where you are, and it's that convergence that matters, and sharing, right, each other's perspective and communicating in a manner that is going to lead to the trust and players understanding that you have their best interest at heart, even when you got to make tough decisions. I had to, kick a kid off my team, D'Angelo Harrison, and I'm probably as close to him as any player I've coached, right up there. And yet he was having some challenges just with how to channel his emotions. And he actually got some help from John Lucas and his program down in Houston. And then he came back, was all conference as a junior, all conference as a senior. He's third leading scorer in St. John's history. He led us back to the NCAA tournament in our final season in 2015. He's still playing overseas. But there was a time where, it was clear we needed to, create a timeout for D'Angelo. And I was going to support him if he wanted to pursue the pros or transfer to Arizona, another school, because he would have gotten anywhere he wanted to in the country. But he really wanted to stay with his family at St. John's and kind of earn his way back, garner the respect of the staff and his teammates. And I commend him, because a lot of young people might have bailed out and just gone to another school or started to pursue professional basketball. But he chose to come back, break records, lead us to a tournament, earn his degree. So to your initial question, I think young people are in a different world in terms of technology, but I still think their heart, their soul, and their potential is the same. And I think it's on us as teachers, coaches, and parents to, again, find the fresh and original ways to bring forth their best.
So what do you, obviously you had a great career at UCLA, and then you took time off, and obviously you worked at ABC, ESPN. And I'm going to make the NFL point here too, because you compare well with Mike McCarthy. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and he took time off and then he came back to coaching. So what do you say, taking time off and doing some sideline work as an analyst at ABC, ESPN, would you say that helped you become a much better coach at St. John's along the way too?
Yeah, I think it increases your basketball acumen, because similar to a professor that takes a sabbatical to do extra research or, to publish a book, or maybe it's dropping in with your family and reconnecting with your loved ones, whatever someone chooses to do with that time. Because right, we're born, might get a little slap on the fanny, we burp, we have our first breath at birth, and then we have our last breath at death, and everything in between, right, is an opportunity. And what we do with that time and the space of being on this planet is really, what we're after, what matters, the quality of that time and space. So for me, the time away was an opportunity to connect with my mother and father. And I'm grateful. When I was fired at UCLA, I got time with my father that I would have never had if I had continued coaching. But being in television allowed for more time with mom and dad. And so when my father died, there wasn't the regret that you might have if there wasn't the time carved out for your parents. And then when I was fired at St. John's, my mom died shortly thereafter, and I was able to caretake for her in the home stretch of her life. And that would have never happened if I was still the coach at St. John's. And the people at Fox were wonderful in terms of allowing me that time to be with her 24/7 in the final months of her life. So bringing it full circle, our parents give us that first breath, and then we're there as they cross the finish line for their last breath. And I'm grateful because having the pink slip, getting fired, being relieved of my duties, whatever the vernacular terminology today is, allowed me those incredible gifts of being there for my mom and dad before they passed.
And everything truly happens for a reason.
True.
When you were in the analysis world, in the TV world, what did you find was most interesting about that position? And now when you listen, or even then when you did listen to other color analysts, like what stood out to you? What made people endearing and kind of engaging? Like what makes a good color analyst, I guess.
Yeah, another good question. Some of my mentors, going way back, Al McGuire. I loved his irreverence, lively, fresh way of presenting the sport of basketball. And of course, he was on a great team with Billy Packer and Dick Enberg, arguably the best three-man booth in the history of sports. All interesting people. But Al McGuire, I loved his flavor, his authenticity, bringing the New York to the broadcast booth. And he had a passion for basketball, and obviously was an outstanding coach that made the transition to broadcasting. And I'm just thinking one of the pinch me, I'm dreaming moments was when I was at Purdue. I picked him up at the airport to bring him in for a Nike clinic that was being held in West Lafayette as an assistant to Gene Cady. In my apprentice years, I had these really kind of interesting responsibilities and tasks. And one of them was just this long drive from the airport back to campus, listening to Al McGuire and being able to ask him questions about coaching, about broadcasting. I love Bill Raftery, who's been a great mentor of mine. We worked together at ESPN, and he was always there to lend an ear, to put things in perspective, to be able to advise me in really helpful ways, and thoughtful in his manner. And I think he's one of the best in the history of sports broadcasting, because, again, authenticity, his joy for broadcasting, his quick wit, his sense of humor. And everyone loves Bill Raftery. He's impossible not to love. Comes from good stock and has a great family. Jim Valvano, and someone else I got to spend time with when I was an assistant at UCLA. He covered a couple of our games for ABC with Brent Musburger, and had the opportunity to pick his brain, and towards the late stages of his life. And so, I study, again, back to being interested, all the different types of sports analysts. And you borrow, you have to ultimately be yourself. It's like trying to wear someone else's clothes or trying to be someone else. And that was a big part of Coach Wooden's philosophy, is, kind of be true to yourself. And you can refine and elevate, enhance, and improve upon the version of who you are. But you ultimately want to kind of be yourself. And, you again, borrow, like I'd say, borrowing recipes, from others, but then add them into your cookbook. It still has to be your cookbook, and kind of being comfortable in your own skin and whatnot. But you're always, working on a glossary of, terminology, because language is really what broadcasting is, and being able to present things in new ways, because we're talking about pick and roll and pick and pop and posting up and rebounding, and so you've got to find ways to keep that language, be a wordsmith. Again, back to being interested, the etymology, the root of words, and that I think really helps. So I do try and keep expanding my glossary of terms or phrases.
I got to ask you, I bet every coach's dream is to coach in the Madison Square Garden. So for you, what was the experience like coaching at MSG, the most famous arena, and in the atmosphere in front of those fans? What was it like just coaching in that arena?
You're right. The Garden is as good as it gets. And interestingly, I went to Madison Square Garden as an assistant coach at UCLA. Then I brought teams in to the Garden as the head coach at UCLA. Then I covered games in the Garden as a broadcaster with Brett Musburger,
Mhm.
and also covering, the Jordan Classic and some of the high level McDonald's games and things along those lines in the Garden. And then to be the head coach of St. John's and bring teams, into the Garden as the head coach of the home team, the Johnnies. So to do it, in all those different respects was really unique. And the Garden holds a special place in my heart. When we had it rolling, that place was as impressive a venue to play in as there is. And I've been in some good ones, but there was just a different, palpable energy when the Johnnies took the floor in Madison Square Garden. Then you look up the Raptors, you see Red Holzman and Bill Bradley and Clyde Frazier and Willis Reed.
Yeah.
It's special. And even down below in the hallways of the Garden, the Elvis Presleys and Marilyn Monroe's, JFK. I mean, it's pretty unique. So it was something I treasure. And of course, I've gone back now as a broadcaster again to call Big East games at the Garden. So love it.
I'm curious where you're at right now. What is next for you? What do you want to do? Obviously, you've left your mark on a ton of players throughout your coaching career, but what kind of mark do you want to leave at this point in the next thing that you do?
Yeah, it's about, being open, being interested and being open. And it's interesting in my career, the gifts have kind of revealed. I was always pursuing coaching and trying to refine the craft of teaching and coaching and keep finding fresh and original ways to seek out, better teaching methods and continue to do that. But I really enjoy my work in television. If there was a good fit, I'd consider a return to coaching because I miss the competition. I miss the camaraderie with the kids. I miss problem solving. I enjoy the New York Times crossword puzzle or the riddle of coaching young people. And so that actually stimulates, I find it intoxicating, where I know some people are like, oh, young people, how can you do it? And I'm kind of wired the other way. Like, I love that. It's more like, oh, old people. I really enjoy tackling the problems and working in concert with my staff and what other resources we can possibly draw upon in terms of experts in the respective fields, because it is a complicated world that we live in terms of mental health and addictions and all these different elements, COVID-19 now. So, and every family has its own set of challenges, including my own. So I think for me, a return to coaching, if it was a good fit. I was really enjoying my time at ABC ESPN and turned down some high profile jobs because I just didn't feel it was the right fit at that time. The jobs were really intriguing and high level positions, but it has to be a marriage and there has to be that fit to make it work mutually. And St. John's was one of those opportunities where I sprinted across the finish line because it was the Big East. It was a Catholic school. It was New York City. I had tradition and heritage. It was really similar to a UCLA, but on the East Coast. And they hadn't experienced the national championship success of UCLA, but they had NIT championships when the NITs were bigger than the NCAA championships back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, up through even the 70s. And the NIT now is kind of takes on a different place in the college basketball world. But way back, many aren't aware that the NIT was the big boy, and the NCAA came along later, and it's become March Madness. But it wasn't always that way. So St. John's had incredible success in terms of wins and All-Americans, and players sent to the NBA and the NIT titles, and the coaching history there was incredible with Lapchek and McGuire and Lou Carnesecca, all Hall of Fame basketball coaches as well. So, but my point is St. John's was a good fit. So I went back. If a good fit presents, I'd go back. If not, the idea of continuing to work in broadcasting is pretty appealing. And the other elements, I teach a broadcast class at Chapman University. So there are other, things that present. I work with the NCAA a couple of years back in the Western region with their recruiting camps that they have in 4 regions of the country. COVID didn't allow us to have that program this past summer, but once things settle down, I think that'll be an opportunity as well that I look forward to participating in.
Yeah. Wherever you land up next, you're a legend in both jobs anyway. So you're
That's
I consider
very
you,
kind of you.
yeah, I consider you a legend and the GOAT of college basketball. So.
Very kind, you guys. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
You guys are good for my self-esteem. Pump me up. Gassing me up. Is that what they say today?
Yeah.
So you gotta let me know.
Yes, yeah. Yep.
But,
All right, good.
But it's the truth. It's true gassing.
Okay.
yes.
Okay, good.
But I got to ask you about your analyst, and obviously you work at Fox Sports and CBS Turner too. So what's it like just building those connections? Obviously, it's really important to build connections in this industry. Obviously, you built a lot of connections with the coaching on the coaching side, but for you on the broadcasting side, you work with Jim Jackson. He's one of the best out there. Like you said earlier, Aaron Andrews. She's by far my favorite female analyst out there too. And you worked with Mike Hill. I had him on the show last year too. Mike Hill is one of the best too. So what's it like just building those relationships and working with them throughout a daily basis?
Yeah, it doesn't even seem like work when you have friends, people that you have a good rapport with, and you get to, share the common love of basketball as broadcasters. That's something to really be grateful for. And I've been fortunate to have, tremendous friends / mentors. Brent Musburger was the one that really took me under his wing and taught me the sports television business. But there were also executive producer bosses, Dan Steer, who worked at ESPN and later at NBC, was really helpful in terms of sitting down, reviewing my work, and pointing out areas that I could improve upon, just like a coach does with a player. And I've got a great team here as well at Fox, Barty and Kent and Jordy, who are in touch with me on a frequent basis as we discuss ways we can present college basketball in a better light, so it's a better experience for our viewers. And how do we inform but entertain? And you can't force the chemistry. Either it's there, it's not. And really fortunate. Some of these people, like Mike Hill, I worked with him at ESPN, I think, for 6 or 7 years, and now it's been 6 years here. So if you combine the 2 stops, we had like 13 years together. And Jimmy Jackson, I had the opportunity to coach when Coach Katie was the USA coach of the Pan Am or the World University Games teams. Jimmy was at Ohio State and a player, as was Tony Bennett and a number of other, Christian Leitner. So had the opportunity going way back to even coach with Jimmy, and now we get to enjoy a good cigar and an adult beverage after a long day at the studio. So it is what makes basketball, it sounds cliche or trite, but it's really true. That 6 degrees of separation and the relationships you build, the friendships, the memories that last a lifetime. And that's where I pitch myself to be able to have done this, 32 years associated with the game of basketball as an assistant, as a head coach, as a broadcaster, and an opportunity like today where we get to talk basketball and I get to engage with 2 new friends as a result of technology bringing us together in the sport that we all love, basketball.
Yes, so grateful for that. Last question for me, and it can be as quick as you want. Pac-12 has obviously not been what it was when you were at UCLA. Obviously, it was Pac-10 then, but where do you think they need to go? I mean, obviously, it's a joint effort, but is there anything you see that's missing compared to conferences like the Big East and other ones that Big Ten that have really risen, and Pac-12 has kind of been up and down? Pac-12.
It's really an interesting question. I think it's cyclical, that they're having a stretch where everything lined up against them in terms of some recruits and recruiting classes that didn't live up to their hype. The lack of continuity in terms of coaching and coaches turnover at respective schools. And, it just happens where, then you have a couple great players, but they go out as underclassmen or kids go into the transfer portal. And when all those things happen at once, it can really cripple the prospects of football and basketball in the Pac-12. But I think all the fundamentals are there in terms of great institutions, good coaches, and TV markets, prospects, recruiting, areas geographically that are strong. And so it will return, and we've seen it. ACC has had down ticks. Southeastern Conference has had stretches where, they're not at the height of their powers. The Big Ten hasn't won a national championship since 2000 when Michigan State cut down the nets with Lateen Cleaves and company. So I think the Pac-12 will return. It's just going through a really difficult stretch. There's going to be new leadership now as Larry Scott steps away. And so we have to allow for the new leadership to kind of adapt and adjust and bring in the changes that, they deem appropriate. But there's just too much heritage, too much tradition, too many good schools, great facilities, outstanding student athlete prospects for the Pac-12 not to return to greatness.
Before we let you go, I got a couple more things here for you. The first one, this NBA draft is going to be loaded with great talent. And for you on the broadcasting side, what's it like just seeing these young players grow? And I want to get to two particular players, Cade Cunningham and Jalen Johnson, who recently said he's going to step down for the rest of the season and focus on the draft. But what are your thoughts on those two players so far?
Cunningham is special. I mean, he plays at a pace where he's never in a hurry. He makes surgical, passes. He sees the game at a next level. What people talk about playing checkers or playing chess. He's the equivalent of playing chess on the floor. I love his size. It's not as though he's, a dynamic world-class athlete in the sense of being able to climb the ladder. And yet he's a tremendous athlete in terms of economy of movement, purposeful use of the bounce, understanding angles in terms of driving the ball or passing the ball, and late clock, late game. He's a cool customer and enjoys the big moment, can rise up to meet that big moment, and crunch time performer deluxe. So his prospects are off the charts. I think he'll be a top 5 pick and arguably is right up there with Jalen Suggs at Gonzaga. I think, Suggs and Cunningham are probably two of the very best when you look at point guards. And Jared Butler, is dynamic as well at Baylor, and Colin Gillespie is remarkable at Villanova. So it's a strong class when you look at potential pro point guards. But Cunningham is right up there with Suggs.
So Suggs, would you put Suggs as number 1 in terms of draft order?
I think it really is going to be dependent. It's like beauty is right in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Right. What one person sees as art, someone else sees as trash. And so these two, in my view, are next level, and you can't go wrong. Suggs, a little more stout in terms of his shoulders, kind of his physical stature. Cunningham, a little more height in terms of being able to see over the top of defenses, and he's a little more lean in his build. His muscle mass, type is different. So they are different, but you couldn't go wrong with either. It's like Joe Montana or Steve Young.
Yes.
They're both special. They're both going to help you win. They're both tremendous leaders and quarterback their respective teams.
Mm-hmm. So I know earlier that you were talking about fit for you. So obviously I want to take this back, and Seattle, like Alyssa said, she's a Seattle fan. And I think it's time for another NBA team to go there in Seattle, expansion team or something. And for you, if they do get an expansion team in Seattle, would you consider being a coach for expansion team, leading that team and building your own team? And because with the resume you have, I think you deserve a shot in the NBA. And well, if not that, another NBA team, would you consider just coaching in the NBA in general?
I don't know if I'd be viable just at leading a self-examined life and being realistic. And I'm very aspirational and a positive thinker, but I'm not sure that I would be a candidate to become the head coach of an NBA team. But what would intrigue is, working in the front office as, an assistant GM to someone, or, player personnel. I do think some of the skills and experiences and background that I have could add some value, or being a veteran coach. It's really interesting. When I was, UCLA, I was considered, too young. And then you get to a period in your life we consider too old. It's kind of interesting. There's never some in between. But so, being the right hand or a sounding board for a younger coach would be intriguing at the next level. So the NBA intrigues me, whether it's assistant coaching, some position in the front office, scouting, because of having coached so many NBA players and my relationships with a number of people that are in the NBA in terms of front office and coaching. At some point, that would be intriguing. But going back to an earlier question, I think maybe Alyssa asked, it's really about the fit and timing. And in my life, things have just naturally kind of revealed themselves. Doors kind of open or opportunities present, and never, the full court press or aggressively pursuing things. It's one thing to be interested, but you could be interested in opportunities and not necessarily be, in full pursuit or full throttle or putting the full court press. Because I think sometimes when we do that, we might miss out on better opportunities that are more naturally a fit.
Mm-hmm. I want to, obviously we lost a lot of legends here in the sports industry, but I want to get to one from Temple University, John Chaney. Rest in peace to the late John Chaney. And have you interacted with him before throughout your coaching career? And can you speak on the legacy of him?
Yeah, interesting story. I mean, we lost a giant, one of the last of the Mohicans. Hard to, articulate all the different ways John Chaney contributed to this game. He coached on the high school level. He coached at Chaney State, which was Division II, won a national title there. Obviously, the phenomenal run at Temple, the love that his players have for him, the life lessons that he instilled in his players, the way his teams played in terms of taking care of the basketball, working for great shots, the discipline. My very first broadcast in 2005 was Illinois and Temple at the Palestra. Bruce Weber might have been in his first or second year at Illinois. John Chaney was still at Temple. I went to the practice before the game to take notes, do my preparation for the first broadcast of my career. And I guess this would be 16 years ago, and really enjoyed watching his practice. He stopped practice more than I would have imagined. And sometimes he talked for 15 minutes about something in life. Someone from, his past. It might have been a buddy from the neighborhood. It could have been something happening in current events, the news. And there was a tie-in to basketball and life. And he had a wonderful way of doing that. I leave that practice. I'm walking back to my hotel, and just a storm, rain comes down on me. And I'm a long way to the hotel. This is before Uber or Lyft. And amazing, I hear this honk of a horn. Little sports car pulls over. The window rolls down. He says, I won't use the language. There's a little profanity, but he's like, get in here. And he opens the door. I jump in the car. He drove me back to my hotel. So he literally gave me some shelter in the midst of a storm. And we ended up talking for, I think this must have been 2003, 2004. That was my first year in broadcasting. So it was 2003, 2004. And we ended up talking like an hour about basketball, about, the transition that I was in between broadcasting, coaching to broadcasting. And I think it was like D. Brown, Luther Head, Darren Williams, James Augustine. It was that Illinois team.
Yeah.
But it was the year before they went. So maybe it was 2003, 2004. They went to the championship game in 2004, 2005, and lost to North Carolina. Roy Williams' first national championship with the Tar Heels. But that impression of John Chaney, the willingness, extending the olive branch, pulling over, it was the first time I had met him, and taking me back to my hotel, giving me shelter in the middle of a storm, and then just sharing stories and experiences and talking life. At that intersection, it was important to me because I just left, coaching and was starting a new career. And he was, in a way, encouraging me, providing courage when I didn't have it myself. And for that gift, I'll be thankful forever. And just an outstanding coach.
Mm-hmm. So before we get to the last two things, we partnered up with we're part of the Hugh Jackson Foundation. I'll send you the page, and we're trying to help prevent human trafficking and making sure the community stays safe and making sure the kids make the right choices. So I just want to bring that up real quick, and we're really grateful to be ambassadors for them. And the last two things here real quick, do you have any Kobe memories throughout your career?
What kind?
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant. Oh, well, we recruited him to UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
And, we knew pretty early on that he was going to pursue the NBA. If he were to go to college, he would have come to UCLA.
Wow.
And we had the same agent, Arn Tellem, who represented me, also represented Kobe. Kobe was, in the men's gym, in the Wooden Center, and in Pauley Pavilion on a consistent basis around his Lakers schedule during the off season. So he knew our players well. He enjoyed hanging out on campus, getting a smoothie and sitting on Bruin Walk, because I think he realized that by going straight to the NBA, he missed that experience of, being a student athlete and being on a college campus. But he was able to capture some of that magic by being at UCLA and being around our players. And so enjoyed. We also lived close to one another when I was broadcasting down in Newport Beach. I lived down there for about 4 or 5 years, and he lived in Newport Coast. And so I'd see him on occasion down there shopping as well. So just, great respect for what he did in his career, the legacy that he's left behind. And he was, as gifted as any player that's ever, picked up basketball.
Man, imagine if he played at UCLA, that'd been something special.
Wow.
But the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
I think it's gratitude. I mean, the soldiers, the foot soldiers, the guardian angels, right, are the people saving lives with boots on the ground, so to speak, and to sacrifice. And so gratitude for those that are sacrificing in so many ways, literally putting their life on the line as, we battle this virus. And it's unparalleled, unprecedented. And as a result, it's needed. The type of, guardian angels, warriors in healthcare and beyond to try and navigate through these horrific times, this dreaded virus that we're trying to eradicate.
Do you have anything else to add, Alyssa? Or?
No, that's it. Gratitude for you for coming on. Was there something else you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I was just going to say I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed spending the time with you guys, and you have your work cut out for you. Probably got to edit some of this down, but
that's all right.
But I enjoyed it.
I put the whole thing up.
Yeah, we'll put the whole thing up. And but thank you again for coming on. This wraps up episode 708 with former college coach, UCLA Bruins, St. John's coach Steve Lavin, and obviously he does great work at CBS Turner and Fox Sports as a broadcaster. Go check him out. Go follow him on all social media formats. Throughout actually his coaching career, I want to bring this up because I forgot to bring it up earlier. 226 wins to 133 losses. That's amazing. And if no one knows that in math terms, the 630 winning percentage. That's crazy. And you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. So,
wow, I appreciate you guys are superstars, and I'm glad the show is doing so well. The word is getting out, and I know you're going to continue to secure guests that are interesting and connect with you guys. So if I can ever do anything for you down the line, let me know.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the insight. And
thank you. All right. Take care.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye.
Yep.